This week, we're excited to host Dr. Izzy Justice, a leading expert in sports, neuroscience, and emotional intelligence. In this episode, we'll explore how neurohacking techniques are bridging the gap between neuroscience and our overall being as entrepreneurs. With a wealth of knowledge and experience, this promises to be a captivating conversation. Let's dive into this illuminating discussion with Dr. Izzy Justice. Okay, so this morning I've got Izzy, Dr. Izzy Justice on. Actually, we were able to do your course, which I'm so grateful we were able to do that. And I just want to share, if I had all the time in the world, I'd share everything I possibly could about what we took away from your course and what we're actually doing in our everyday lives to stay green. And for people who don't know green, you will definitely know what that means after this episode. But Izzy, I'm excited to hear your story. I know I learned a little bit about your story and your background through your course, but I'd love to learn more and for our listeners to know how you got started into what you're doing today.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Nicole, thanks for having me. And it was such a pleasure to have you go through the program. And, I'm constantly figuring out ways to sort of scale what I do. And I think doing podcasts like this to at least, whet the appetite of people out there. Let's just start with the human condition. I think all of us, all human beings across the world, we have found ourselves in a human condition that, frankly, I don't know that we are prepared for. And so there are probably 3 or 4 things that I just want to set the stage with that globally, irrespective of your gender, your race, your ethnicity, your economic background, we all have a brain and we're all living in the world that we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that really it in terms of the condition that we're in started to change around 2010-ish. That's the time when technology completely transformed our lives. The explosion of mobile devices, number one, so the actual hardware started to the tune of now we have about 18 billion devices in the world for 8 billion people. And then number two, what is in those devices has fundamentally changed. Now we do everything on our mobile device. And the 2 things, Nicole, that I can cover quickly in terms of how we got here is, the average EEG. So EEG is the measure of the noise in your head, if you would, of a normal person alive today. Mm-hmm. Is the equivalent of a schizophrenic patient from the 1950s. And that's largely because of 2 reasons, in my view. One of them is we have access to an abundance of stimuli. Like wherever we go, our phones are in our hip pockets, they're in our purses. And so, that free moment that we have when something is not going on, instinctively, we're just taking our hands, we're grabbing that device and starting to look at it. It's this constant consumption of stimuli that our brain was not designed to do, Nicole. I mean, if you think back to 5 generations ago, and I'll get to the second point here shortly, 5 generations ago, so just 10, 20 years ago, most human beings never traveled more than 50 miles from where they were born. They didn't live past the age of, say, 40, 45-ish. Same weather, same threats, same stimuli, and compare that existence from the beginning of time to what we're consuming now. Mm-hmm. The second point, and then I'll pause and throw it back at you, is it's not, people always say, oh, there's social media. So I don't think it's that in terms of what the devices are doing to our brains. What's really going on is what I call instant shared trauma. So I give the example that, maybe once every 2 years, 3 years, God forbid, I'm driving and there's a car accident. It's happened maybe 30 minutes, an hour before I got there, but everything is slow now. And you see ambulances and cops and fire trucks. And as you slowly pass through this wreck, you see the car all crumbled up and your body kind of shakes. I mean, it's not your accident, it's somebody else's accident. You don't know who people are, but you see something that just, somebody got hurt and someone maybe got killed. And it bothers you for a while, right? I mean, if you're normal, it bothers you.
Yeah.
So in that same way, we are instantly consuming some version of that. Like if your friend, any one of your friends, something goes wrong with them, they text you immediately. If there's an earthquake, God forbid, in Turkey, the video images are available to us instantly, like within minutes. The war that's going on in Ukraine right now, we see buildings crumbling, and even in the Middle East, or tsunami, or I mean everything from small things that people are going through. I just broke up with my girlfriend. I just broke up with my boyfriend. They don't have to wait any longer to meet you somewhere, to talk to you, and to share that, because you're their friend. So we are experiencing almost too much of that being driving by a car accident and feeling kind of not so good, because it's a trauma. But now we are consuming instantly so much trauma. I grew up in Africa, as you know well, and I'm old as dirt. And
Oh, stop.
we we had Time magazine. Like, we got our news from Time magazine that was 2 weeks old in picture format. And so we would see pictures of what happened in other parts of the world. And there was that distant, a picture kind of insulates you from, okay, yeah, it's not good, but it's not real.
Yeah.
But now when you get a text message, when you see a video, and instantly, and, so our brains are not designed to consume instant shared trauma. And so other people's trauma becoming our trauma. And that's leading to that very high EEG that we all have now. And mental health of everybody is a major crisis, and that's why I'm happy to be on your podcast.
On this podcast, we always talk about nutrition and how important our gut health is, as well as how our brains function when we're eating superfoods, and obviously the convenience of having those available. Personally, I'm like a low-key, non-prep, don't like to be in the kitchen kind of person, and I'm sure a lot of my entrepreneurs and busy moms and busy people listening can completely relate to this. Now, if you haven't tried Revive or heard of it, it's definitely a game changer. With my promo code and my affiliate links linked below, you will be able to receive 50% off your first order / box of these delicious pre-portioned super foods that can be delivered right to your door with free delivery at checkout. So just hit the link below for the affiliate links as well as the promos to get 50% off your first box of these delicious pre-portioned meals that you're going to be thanking me for later.
Yeah, and that's something I find with a lot of our clients too, because we're in the service industry, and getting a lot of, we're almost therapists, I also say, as like we're doing someone's nails or the lashes, and someone feels comfortable. We're in a closed room that they're opening to us, and then we're absorbing a lot of their negativity or things like that too when it comes to social media. So we're kind of consumed about a lot of, and like sometimes negative energy, and then we're going home to decompress, and then we're on our phones scrolling, and then it's all the trauma coming in again. What are some of the ways, I know through your course there was quite a few strategies that we learned how to kind of step away from the noise, and how to almost meditate and understand when you're getting into those different levels, like when you want to get back into that green state, when you want to learn how to be, you're coming home and you're just, oh my gosh, you use that great example of being almost in your car or sitting in your garage before you go into your home, how to kind of be able to get that feeling away and to get into that green state instead of being in that red state. What are kind of some of the things our listeners could use from those points?
Yeah. So let me just take one step backwards before I talk about the neurohacks that that you learned. But so if I were to ask people in general, hey, what do you do to relieve your stress?
Mm-hmm.
And invariably, I'll get answers like, I go work out. I think that's a wonderful thing. People usually work out in the morning. At the end of the day, a few people will work out in the middle of their workday if it's practical. For most people, it's not practical.
Yeah.
So that's one thing people do to kind of relieve stress. Another thing they might do is they might, go for a walk. They might listen to music. They might sit in a hammock somewhere. So there are all these things that we know people can do. The problem with those, and again, I am a fan of those. I'm a fan of meditation. I'm a fan of yoga. These are good things to do. The problem with them is that they're not practical to do in the course of a day. You can do them in the morning. I do yoga and meditation almost every morning, and I wake up at 4:30 every morning, which I don't recommend, but that's my peaceful zone. I've measured my own EEG, and by 8 o'clock, the cognitive benefit of doing yoga at 4:30 or 5 in the morning is gone. I open up my email because I have to work, and I open up my phone because I have to work, and I have to communicate with people, and I have to collaborate with people, and my baseline is back to where it is. So even though those traditional methods, Nicole, are good, and I encourage people to do them, I do them, they're no longer enough. We need a different model. We need more of a micro snack or a micro yoga or micro meditation that don't take as long, that we can do throughout the course of the day. So this model of, oh, on the weekends, those 2 days after 5 days is when I'm going to decompress, is not going to work, because we're consuming. The model of, oh, when I get home after 5, 6 o'clock, that's when I'm going to decompress, is also not going to work. That worked before 2010 when our brains weren't consuming that much. So we need more of a fix it as you go model. And that's where these neurohacks come in. So what's a neurohack? A neurohack is a small bite-sized physical activity or a visual stimuli that you can feed your brain that take a few seconds, at the most 60 seconds, that have the cognitive benefit of doing yoga or meditation. So for example, one of the things that you just mentioned is that I do is when I park my car in the driveway, I do one of the neurohacks called 10-2 on my steering wheel. And because my goal is, no matter what's happened to me in my workday or where I've come from, that noise, that stress, I do not want to open my door, my garage door going into my house, and infect my family with that. They don't deserve that. And so I do a 10-2. I squeeze my steering wheel. I ask myself, where is my brain? Is it red, yellow, or green? And as you know, red is a very agitated state. There's a lot of electricity in the brain. There's heat in the brain. I'm mad. I'm annoyed. I'm frustrated. Yellow is normal. Yellow is where most of us live all the time, and that's sort of, you know, an average frequency of hertz in your brain. And green is that amazing state when I feel calm and relaxed, and I'm smiling and I'm laughing and I'm noticing things and those kinds of things. So I think having a much simpler language to begin with, to say, okay, I'm parking my car, or I'm getting ready to go do a presentation, or I'm getting ready to go do a Zoom call, you know, like, where is my brain? Instead of saying, am I mad, glad, happy, sad, annoyed? Like, what do those words mean? We never agreed to them. By saying, is my brain red, yellow, or green? And then based on that, doing a neurohack, like a 10-2, where you squeeze the steering wheel and you slowly let go. That the language is very helpful. It's a non-judgmental language because it's color. And then doing these simple neurohacks. Like when I'm sitting in the car getting ready to go into the garage, I cannot do yoga. I cannot do meditation. I cannot go for a run. I mean, I just have a minute or two before I get out of the car and go into my house. If I am getting ready for a meeting and I prepared really well, and now it's 2 or 3 minutes, I suddenly start to feel, oh my gosh, I'm breathing hard. I'm nervous. And my brain is starting to think of everything that can go wrong. Well, in that moment, you know, the clock is ticking. You cannot do yoga. You cannot do meditation. You cannot go for a workout or a run or a swim. Those are good things to do, but you can't do them. But you can do a neurohack, and you can get your brain calm. And so last thing I'll say to you, Nicole, is I think it's too much of an ask. I can't do it to say, oh, I got to be perfect all day long. It's just not possible. Our brains are consuming. I think it's a much easier ask to say, okay, what are the 1 or 2 times a day? So we call it game time. Yes. What are my 2 game times each day? That doesn't mean the other things that we do in our workday aren't important. They are. But which are the 2 most important ones? And for those 2 most important ones, if I can hack my brain and be the best version of myself, that's a much easier ask. It's much easier to say, can I be the best version of myself? It might be dinner with my children. It might be a board meeting. It might be a sales call with the customer. It might be a brainstorming session where we're under the gun and we've got to cut a budget, whatever it may be. If we're using our brain, it's easier to say, oh, okay, for the next hour, 30 minutes, however long it is, let me stay green. And I can hack my brain to stay green. And then as you noticed, If you do well at something that you need to do well at, well, then you feel good.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I love the things that we learned were amazing because you could put it into any direction. Like as you were talking at the beginning too, like whether you're a business entrepreneur or a athlete or a mother or like a spouse of relationships, there's so many different avenues that this can be anywhere in your life. And I remember one of the first conversations you and I had was talking about how they should have been putting this when we were younger. They're teaching us all these things in school, right? But they're not teaching us how our brain works. And I love the examples that we had in your program, learning about how the brain actually works, even with like sleep too, where I feel like we're in such a society where it's like the grind, you got to stay up all night to get through this, or in and like the pressure, whether you're in school and programs. And I feel like with what I learned from you is you can not go to sleep and your brain's barely working when you wake up the next morning. It's better to go to bed, have the good night's sleep. Your brain's going to be working. I forget what was the percentages you were saying with the brain, like if you didn't get a good night's sleep, the percentage, how far down it goes. I can't remember the exact stats you had mentioned.
Yeah. So a red brain will basically be operating at 5%.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wild to me.
Yeah.
That just blows my mind. And I love how you kind of take the pressure off us as humans, saying like having those game times. Cause yeah, you feel like you need to be perfect all day, but then you're almost at like that mild
Yeah.
production or like productivity too, right?
Yeah. So again, when I say 5%, I mean, the brain is always working constantly,
Yeah.
nonstop, when we're sleeping. What I really mean is that our cognitive function, our ability to remember all the things that we have done, when your brain is red, so you're really agitated, you're stressed out, you're anxious, you won't remember that conversation that you had, that article that you read, the preparation that you had, because there's just so much noise in your head, this competition in your own brain
Yeah.
between the distracting thoughts and the moment right now.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
so that's why our functionality drops, and it's fluid. You
Mm-hmm.
can, as quickly as it can drop, you can change it by, again, feeding your brain these neural hacks that you can do. And then the sleep part of it, sleep to me is the other silent pandemic globally. And
Yes.
people are selling beds and mattresses and lights and those kinds of things, and fine. But ultimately, the reason you're not able to sleep, or we aren't able to sleep globally, is because there's just so much noise in our head. There isn't enough. Your brain, when it's sleeping, is still processing so much consumption, stimuli, cognitively throughout the course of the day. So there's a sleep hack, as you know, it's called the 411, that I developed, and I teach people about, just taking a moment before you go to bed and saying, okay, what were some of the good things that happened to me today on this day, not last week? Just inventory some of the good stuff. Remind your brain, hey, it was still a good day. Because if you don't, your brain will do what it's designed to do, which is to inventory the bad stuff of the day.
If you're a busy person like most of us and forget to take your vitamins every morning, Gyra Vitamins has made it extremely easy to remember. What I personally do is I just put the box beside my coffee maker, because we all know I can't forget my coffee in the morning, and I make sure that my everyday vitamins are ready to go, either if I'm on the go and/or I throw them in my purse. It's a great way to keep them all in a compact space, as well as keeping your cupboards and cabinets clean and simple. Now, with my promo code capital NME7GR, you will receive 50% off your first order. Now, another great thing I love about this business is they really care about you. Now, when you go online, they're going to ask you questions of why you need vitamins or what you're really needing in your everyday life. Personally, we all need a little bit of extra energy, maybe some extra magnesium, things like that. And this is a great way to keep the questions out of your mind when going to the grocery store and/or a drugstore to pick up your vitamins. Now, once again, that promo code is capital NME7GR for 50% off your first order.
Because that's just part of our survival construct and algorithms that our brain uses. It needs to remember the threats and the dangers of the day to protect us. All living creatures, have that common functionality. We are threat designed, search engines.
Yes.
When we are faced with a stimuli, especially anything negative, our search engine does not go to good place. It
No.
wants to give it meaning, and we only give it meaning not by going to Google, but going to our Google and our memories. And
Mm-hmm.
our memories are to make sense of something bad. We go to our bad places. So we have to train our brains to remember the good things that happen to us each day. And, starting with just being alive, starting with anyone, this human being, loving you, starting with having food to eat, starting with having, a roof over your head,
Mm-hmm.
starting with being able to walk. My mother, God bless her soul, she passed away last year. I remember when we were very little, Nicole, and she was not a neuroscientist, but she was, every time that we would feel bad, she would remind us of someone that had less than us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny, that simple technique would make us feel good. We
Mm-hmm.
would complain about something, and she's like, those people don't even have that. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're right. They don't.
Yeah, yeah, kind of putting it back into that reality of like
Yeah.
thankfulness. And that's what I think it takes your brain. Like you're gonna think you can like learn all these things overnight. Like you have to, it's like exercising your brain. Like you have to like one day at a time of teaching it all these skills. And then I've noticed now, because I guess it's been a few months now that after we've taken your program too, is like it almost makes me think, I'm like, I know what I need to do to get back to green, or I know what I need to do when it's that game time. But it was like every day learning these skills and implementing them where I need it and recognizing what state I'm in. I think John and I always laugh because it's like we talk in our own little language. Sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm feeling red or I'm getting to red. Like it's like these conversations we're having to then be like recognizing it, to then recognize that we need to get either to that yellow or that green state.
I think if we want to be healthy, and not just physically healthy, but intellectually healthy,
Yes.
emotionally healthy, I don't think that the human being and the human condition has any choice. We must practice mental health and wellness each day in some fashion. And depending on where you are on your journey, you may have to practice it more than, you know, the same way that you would put a priority on your physical fitness. Oh, I got to go for
Mm-hmm.
a walk, or I got to go for a swim, or even your nutritional, wellness. I got to eat food, you know.
Yes.
Well, in the same way, we have to say, okay, I have a brain right now that in order for me to be a functional human being, I need a mobile device, I need a laptop, I need a wearable because I have to function. Like
Yes. Yeah.
getting rid of those is not an option. If you get rid of those, you can't function in this world. You can't make a living. You can't communicate with your loved one. So I think getting rid of those is it's a hard choice to make, and I don't know that we necessarily have to make that choice if we have skills, if we train our brains to recognize non-judgmentally, like red, green, yellow are colors. I,
Mm-hmm.
when John says to you, I'm red, he's not saying, oh, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I'm anxious. Like those words have so much baggage to them, right?
Yes.
He's
Yeah.
just saying, I'm red, and you can even laugh about it. Okay, you're
Oh, we
red,
do.
5%.
Especially when we're playing in golf tournaments. I'm like, okay, well, you better get this figured out soon because
Yeah,
we got a game to play here. And
yeah.
that's what I love too, is like, it's almost like it kind of gives that little bit of light too, where it's like, okay, I'm feeling that like you've got this language now to use to how you're feeling. And it's taking out, like you said, all those kind of, I forget you had a specific word for them, like those extra words that we're just kind of using in society where it's like, is that actually what your brain's using or how it's feeling?
Yeah. Yeah, I think part of the noise, unfortunately, there are about 400 emotional labels that are out there in the English language, but in other languages as well, like mad,
Yeah.
glad, happy, sad, annoyed, joyous, stressful, anxiety, depressed. I mean, I can go on and on. None of those labels any one of us have agreed to. Like if I asked 10 people to tell me what mad means, all 10 of them would give me an answer. I seriously doubt they'd be the same answer.
That's a really good
So,
point.
so when
Yeah.
we use these emotional labels that are subjective, with you know, it's part of the noise in our head. Like sometimes when I'm coaching people, they say, "Well, Dr. Justice, I don't know whether I'm frustrated or annoyed," and I'm like, why does it matter? You're red.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
why does it matter that you have to choose between those two?
Mm,
And just say that your brain is red. Your ability to navigate the next few minutes or moments is down to 5%. Dude, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Like, you know, let's do something to temporarily get your brain towards green so that, you know, you can perform to the best of your ability at the next task at hand. And that's an easier ask, as opposed to, oh, I got to figure out everything in my life. I got to get this in order and that in order. That's a lot of work.
Oh,
And
it is.
and I think it's a false choice. I think the real choice that we should be making is, let me pick my game times. Do I have the discipline to say, today, you know, what are the 2 times I got to be my best? Put everything in those baskets. And the funny thing happens, if you do that, then you do everything well.
Yeah, it's so
But
true. It's so true. I've noticed that even like what you were saying too about almost like, well, I went a little crazy when with the one exercise you got us to do with the weekly breakdown kind of the time blocking and when our game times were and when we needed to do some of our hacks. And it kind of makes you prioritize your time too. That's what I find. I'm like, okay, I've got this call today and I've got this meeting. How am I gonna like prep to make sure I'm game for it? And then it's almost like it releases that pressure when you're actually on that call or when you're having to perform that game time like opportunity where you're like, I prepped for this. I'm feeling good. I made sure I ate a good meal before I got here. I did some deep breathing before having to have a conversation, like all the things. And it just makes it so much easier. And then your body's kind of doing it without you even asking it to when you get to those game times sometime.
well, you're taking control of your brain. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what you're really doing, as opposed to the other way around.
Yeah.
And your brain will do exactly what it's designed to do, which is to create a lot of noise, to figure out what's going on, to protect you, usually by figuring out all the things that can go wrong. That's what your brain is designed to do. It's not designed to live in the world that we're living in now. So, by you doing all those things, you're saying, no, 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 Mr. Brain, like I'm in charge here.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be the best version of myself, not all day long because it's not realistic. You know, I'm a flawed person. I make mistakes. I've done some things in my past that weren't maybe the best thing in the world. But for this moment, for this upcoming moment that hasn't existed yet, where I need to be my best, negotiate with your brain, make a deal,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and say, okay, let me be, you know, in the next 30 minutes, an hour, you know, I'm going to hack my brain. I will control the thoughts that are in my head by shifting, you know, these thoughts and my senses to the present moment. And it's such a, you know, I tweeted the other day that, you know, I think the best gift that we can give another human being now, truly, Nicole, I believe this, is our full attention.
Yes.
It
I couldn't
really
agree
is.
more. I couldn't agree more. And that's what another thing you had mentioned was talking about having like almost like a shorter answer, like a straight to the point conversation with someone. I used that actually during one of our with our staff assessments is I kind of threw the ball in their court and I was like, how are you doing? And then kind of almost I'm terrible at letting like that pause happen. So I'm like letting kind of that awkward pause in that conversation happen. So then they kind of kickstart the conversation to talk to me to what's going on. And it almost like I had the best assessments I've ever had in like the 8 years of having my business after having one. I think it was our first day together that we had. And it was just like, wow, okay, just straight to the point, maybe like one sentence answer to some of the responses. And it was the best conversations I've had with some of them. Could you elaborate a little bit more
Yeah,
on that?
yeah. You know, because there's so much noise in our head without even knowing it, we're just all talking too much.
Yes.
And, you know, and in a, you know, I always, to me, the spice of life, like what makes life so juicy, are good conversations. Like, you know, where you're telling your true story to somebody else, whatever that might be. You're listening to their true story, whatever that might be. And I think we've lost the art of saying less and listening more. We've lost the art of using questions to
Mm-hmm.
drive conversations as opposed to statements,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But, you know, that's the spice. Conversations, it is what makes the world tick. And if we can become better at it by saying less, asking more questions, listening more, which is what you did, you
Mm-hmm.
know, it's so easy when you're giving somebody feedback to make a point and then give 10 comments to make the point that you just made. Make
Yes.
a point and then be quiet and let them respond. Let them tell their story, get them engaged, and be comfortable with that moment of silence, because you've invited them and their brain to share that, especially in a boss employee or a hierarchical relationship. I think one of the best things a manager or a boss can do, which is what you did, is to create that space, that awkward silence, so that you can invite that person to share their story, their truth, whatever it might be. It's such a great gift to give another human being today, is to be quiet more and
Mm.
and just listen.
I think that's why I love the podcast so much too, is because like every week or maybe even this week I get to record like 2 to 3 podcasts, and it's just like I usually do them in the morning, and it just kind of sets the tone for the day. Or I love listening to my favorite podcasts in the morning because it's like those meaningful conversations that you feel like, especially in the world we live in, I feel like sometimes you're not having those one-to-one in-person conversations as much as maybe we did 100 so years ago. But that's why I feel like podcasting is growing so much, of people actually jumping online and listening to conversations, educating themselves. But it's nothing like the human connection, right? Like the energy, even when I met you in person in the summer, like you can just feel someone's energy. You can feel that connection and how they make you feel, but then being able to communicate that with them and sharing stories and meaningful conversations for sure.
Yeah, yeah. To me, wealthy people are people who can engage in meaningful conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Those people are people I admire so much. I envy so much. I don't admire big houses and fancy cars. I really don't. I envy people that, irrespective of who you are, they can engage with you and listen to you and share something with you. And we've become so divided because of the noise in our head. We can't even have healthy disagreements, and it's really what we need now. We need to be able to disagree in healthy ways. uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I think a big part of that is just listening. And I don't think that we are unintentionally not listening. I just think when our EEG is so high, when the noise in our head is so high, we just don't know when to shut up. We don't know when to listen. We don't know when to ask a question. We don't even notice that the other person is getting bored by what we're saying.
Mm-hmm. That's
And
such a good
so,
point.
yeah,
Wow. And it's crazy what you said too, about what you said in your tweet about having having those conversations without devices, making sure you're actually having that one-on-one conversation without that outside noise. I I know exactly what you mean, because it's almost like you crave that in that human interaction, like to have those conversations one to one without someone even holding their hand. There's oh, what's that guy's name? Is it Simon or something? He did a presentation about that of, okay, give me your phone and I'm going to walk around on stage with my phone in my hand. And how is that making the crowd feeling with even that of just holding your cell phone in your hand versus not having your cell phone at all? Or even going out for dinner with someone. I can't I can't go out for dinner with someone without their phone being on the table. It's like, oh, in case that rings, that's going to be more important than you, how the brain kind of thinks that way as well.
yeah, yeah. So, it's like I was saying earlier, even though we cannot live with our devices, we can choose those moments when we say, okay, in this moment, in this next hour and a half of having dinner with my friends or my spouse or my kids, or, can I suspend that? Um, and so that's part of, I think people will do that if they recognize the cost of having that phone on the dinner table. And the
Yes.
cost of that is you've just missed out on an amazing story, an amazing conversation, a story that you could have learned from, or a story that you could have told to have somebody on. And
Mm,
it's that 2 or 3 seconds of you being distracted that you lose a little nonverbal gesture in somebody else's face.
yes.
So they may be
Yes.
frown or smile, and it's a moment that triggers an idea in your brain, but you lost it,
Yeah.
and that's why I'm saying, like, real wealth to me is just conversations, and you don't need money to do that. You just need, skills and the appreciation that, my goodness, every human being, whether they have $10 in the bank account or $10 billion, they have a story to tell. And we can learn from each other, we can be fascinated by each other, we can help each other. And that's the spice, that's the stuff that when we go to bed, those are the stories we want our brain to be playing, as opposed to, oh, I was stuck in traffic for an hour and a half, or I got delayed, I lost this deal. Like, we have no choice, Nicole, at this point, but to take control of our brains. And mental health and mental wellness, is going to harm us in more ways than one, and we see it. We
Oh,
see
yes, definitely.
increase in domestic violence, in alcohol abuse, in suicides, unfortunately. um, and the folks that I feel the most bad for really are the kids that grew up with this. I
Yes.
didn't grow up with this. So the kids of today, oh my goodness, they have it bad, and the adults in their lives don't know how to deal with it. We have no choice. We have to learn about our brain in the most simplistic way, in the most non-judgmental way. We have to gift each other, similar to what we've developed at Neuro 580. That's our website. If you want to go check it out, is neuro580.com. And there's a lot of good information there about using simple language and simple tools.
And there's so many things. Someone had asked me the other day what my favorite part of being an esthetician was and having a spa. I said, listening to my clients. And I realized that after taking your program, because my favorite part was especially listening to elderly people. Oh my gosh, they have so much wisdom, so much to teach us. And I just loved sitting back and listening to their conversations and stories, and because they know how to talk. Like, our new generation just does not know how to communicate like we did before devices. If I really am, like, completely honest and transparent to my way I feel, is having conversations for hours on end, just being able to talk. And I felt like with my clients within that generation, I could talk to them forever and learn so many things. And it was so, like you said, that juicy spiciness of all the great things. And going to bed that night, I'm like, wow, I learned so much from that person. And I really think with this podcast, as well as having you on and meeting you, Izzy, it's just been such an inspirational light to show that there is a way we can better ourselves as humans, and especially our brains. And with all that outside noise of learning how to actually cope and be able to grow as human beings in a positive way for our next generations.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Let me leave your audience with this sort of last thought, which is that whether you want to admit this or not, we are all mental health workers.
Yes.
And so having skills to be better at that is a good thing. But all of us right now are on the spectrum, and that doesn't make us flawed. That does not make us flawed. That just makes us human.
Absolutely.
We are a mental health worker to our friends, to our families, to our customers, to strangers at the airport and coffee shops who might be having a bad day. But we are all responsible for, doing one small thing, as you call it, greening each other.
Yes.
Your future mother-in-law is having a blast waking up each day and saying, how many people can I green today?
Amazing. And we'll put all your links and everything below, because I just want everyone to learn from you. This has just been an incredible conversation, as always, Izzy. And yes, I thank you so much for your time today.
All right. Cheers. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much, Izzy.